So James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is finally out in theaters and on HBO Max. I recommend all of you guys watch it. Before we get into the non-spoiler review, so there's going to be no spoilers at all, don't worry. We are going to be hosting a live spoiler discussion on Tuesday where we're going to be talking about everything in full live details. It's basically going to be a live spoiler review. So make sure you come join us. And if you want to be a part of that, make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bells. That way you can be notified of future content here on the channel. My name is Isaac, and welcome my fellow film-loving brothers and sisters to the Multiverse of Movies, a channel for all movie fans. And yeah, let's get into the review. So let's get into the negatives. I'll admit there's no negatives. Maybe there's like one little detail. I don't know if this, I guess this isn't a spoiler because they've revealed it too much, but there's there's a moment where Harley, uh, Harley has a connection with this one Latino dude. He's trying to become president. I think he is president of Corto Maltese. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I've never heard of this place, to be honest, but he's president of this country, and he wants Harley to be his queen. I'm not gonna go too much in details, but I'll admit that part was very, I didn't like it. I think that's the only part of the movie I didn't like. It was just, I felt like that was too weird. You guys will see when y'all watch the movie. This isn't a spoiler because they do show it in the trailers. They do show him in the promotions. But that whole Carly and this guy's connection was a little weird because you're there like, what's even the point? Like, what? Like, was this just for Harley to have a cool action scene? But regardless, the rest of the movie was just fantastic from beginning to end. James Gunn, when he was promoting this movie, he said don't get too attached because you don't know who's gonna die. There's gonna be a lot of death, and let me tell you, he was not wrong at all. There are so many deaths in this film. There are so many characters who die that it raises the stakes, and that's something I love so much about this film because something I complain about comic book movies is there are no stakes when characters don't die. Infinity War, you kill half your characters and then they just come back in the next movie. That's why when Iron Man died in Endgame, I didn't feel any emotion because I'm like, no, he'll come back in 5 years. He'll come back in 5 years. Natasha Romanoff, when she dies in Endgame too, I was like, she'll come back in 5 years. Well, probably not because of the whole Disney contract situation, but it's the problem with comic book movies. And I'll admit, DC is also in fault with this. Superman dies in the second movie and then comes back in the third movie, which I did love. Zack Snyder's Justice League is still my favorite comic book movie of all time and my favorite movie of all time. But this movie changed that narrative. It spinned it in a way that I loved it from beginning to end, where you felt the stakes. You felt like at any moment, any character could die, and there were moments where I was shocked with who they killed. I'm not gonna say who they eventually killed, but there was characters that died that I was like, oh my god, I did not think that at all. Uh, and my I remember I even did this prediction game on a stream where I was gonna guess who died and who didn't die. I did guess one of them right, who everyone said that I was dumb for guessing, but I was right on guessing that character was death. But you genuinely feel the stakes. This movie is hard R rated, so if you have children, I would recommend you don't take the kids because the deaths in this movie are gruesome. Again, the first 20 minutes alone felt like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. The deaths alone were just so brutal and you saw it so much. I don't want to even go into details because I guess it's a spoiler, but there's so many deaths in this movie that you just don't expect. But let's talk about the characters individually. My favorite character was Bloodsport. I think Idris Elba as Bloodsport was amazing. The funny thing is, I was not too familiar with Bloodsport. The only thing I knew him from the comics is he did shoot Superman with the kryptonite bullet, which they do say that in the trailers, but sadly they don't show that in the movie. But it's okay because it works. You don't really need to see that scene. They explain it real quick and then bye. But I didn't really know him in the comics, so I thought he was gonna be a ripoff Deadshot. I'll be honest, and everyone around me kept saying he was gonna be a ripoff Deadshot. Let me tell you this right now: he is not a ripoff Deadshot. I'll admit this. I think he is one of my favorite DC characters right now because Bloodsport. You see his development, you see his story. You could say he's the protagonist because he has a lot of screen time. I'll say he has probably the most screen time, but he to me he it's like it's kind of like his journey. You see his development. You see how he's a terrible father. He's not very good with talking to other human beings. He's not a leader, and there's a development through the film with Idris Elba as Bloodsport. And let me tell you, Idris Elba, amazing acting. He was just phenomenal in this role. I think he was perfectly casted. And again, I did not feel Deadshot vibes. In fact, even his suit is different from Deadshot. Sure, they're both master assassins, but they're different in their own unique ways. And I think, even though I love Will Smith as Deadshot, I'll admit Idris Elba was just far better than than Dead any iteration of Deadshot. Because I really do love Bloodsport now, and even though I'm not familiar with Bloodsport, I love him now, and I'll probably start reading more comics with him involved. Some other characters that were also major standouts were Ratcatcher 2. I think she's amazing. Again, I was not too familiar with her in the comics, and I was also surprised they used Ratcatcher 2 instead of 1. But this movie worked very well. Ratcatcher 2 was probably my second favorite character. She was definitely the heart of the movie. I'm not familiar with this actress. I think her name is Daniela Mel something Mel. Her last name was with an M. And let me just say, her acting was great. I think she was one of my favorite characters, and she was definitely the heart and soul of the Suicide Squad. And there are even moments where you're thinking to yourself, how did she even end up here? Because she's so nice and she's so kind. Everyone, you can see why they end up in prison, but with her, you don't see that in a way. And the Polka Dot Man was a character who I've been laughing at the whole time. When they first announced Polka Dot Man, I was like, him in a live action movie. But I gotta say, Polka Dot Man was hilarious. I loved his character. I love how crazy they went with his character. He truly was an amazing character, and I love his character. I love Polka Dot Man. I would say he's one of my favorite characters of the Suicide Squad. Peacemaker John Cena. This is John Cena's best performance. I've been saying this for a while. John Cena's not that good of an actor. Even recently with Fast 9, I thought he wasn't good at all in that film. But in this movie, you saw him put his A game in the dramatic scenes he's in. Oh my God, John Cena finally for the first time is in great dramatic scenes, and James Gunn got the best out of John Cena. And I think that's just the magic of James Gunn. Look what he did with Dave Bautista. He made Dave Bautista a big actor. John Cena, it seems like he's doing the same thing. This was definitely John Cena's best performance, because I'll admit this, John Cena is just not a leading man. John Cena has never been that good of an actor to me, but I feel like with the work of James Gunn, I feel like he can improve upon that. You see the best version of John Cena as an actor. Uh, and you got Michael Rooker's Seventh, Nathan Fillion as TDK. You had Pete Davidson as Blackguard. You had Jai Courtney as Captain Boomerang. Weasel. Weasel's hilarious, man. Weasel's hilarious. But all those side characters, I love them too. They were great. They were awesome. They were fun to watch. I think Joel Kinnaman. I'm not too familiar with him as an actor, but I loved him in this movie. I do like him more in this movie than in the 2016 version. Also, let me just say this: 2016 version has nothing against this film. I think this film is far better than the 2016 version. Like, it does everything in a better structure. I know there's just hashtag release the Ayer cut, and I saw a lot of Ayer fans mad that this movie was coming out. I'll admit this right now. I honestly don't look. I would love to see the Ayer cut. I would. I've been talking about it. I'm literally a Jared Leto Joker fan. I would love to see the Ayer cut, but I'll admit this. I don't think it would be nearly as good as this Suicide Squad movie. And I could be wrong. But that's just my subjective opinion. But James Gunn's Suicide Squad, to me, James Gunn is just the right guy to take on the Suicide Squad. He shows how bad these people are, but shows the good in them, and also shows that anyone can be good. Everyone has good in their soul. But I'll admit one thing is I like Harley Quinn in this movie, but I'll say this: she's not as fun as I expected. Like, I kept seeing a lot of people saying Harley was the MVP. I'll admit I disagree. I think Polka Dot Man, Ratcatcher 2, Peacemaker, Bloodsport, even Rick Flag, I feel like they were better characters. And look, I don't look like the only bad thing was that scene I was talking about, how We're falling in love with the Corto Maltese president. I'll admit, Harley just wasn't as fun as I expected. I don't think this is her best movie. I think Birds of Prey is her best movie. And I'm gonna say this, I feel like James Gunn, like, there was a vibe to me that felt like James Gunn didn't really want Harley Quinn, and it felt like Warner Bros. Was more like, hey, could you put in Harley Quinn, please, please, please? And James was like, well, all right, I guess so. And Harley Quinn was just not that fun to watch in this movie. Like, anytime they would cut to Harley Quinn instead of the rest of the Suicide Squad, I would be slightly disappointed. So that's really the only flaw of this movie. Again, I think Margot Robbie is great in this movie. I think she's awesome. I think Harley Quinn is great as a character. But I'll admit this, she just, it didn't feel like she wasn't as interesting as the other characters, where you're there seeing Polka Dot Man, Ratcatcher 2, and everyone. And I really love it. Now, the action in this movie, something I gotta talk about, is the action is definitely hard R rated. It's very R rated. This movie definitely is an R rating movie. And again, I do not recommend you taking your kids, which honestly I wouldn't recommend it, because when I was in theaters watching this, there was this annoying kid like 2 seats next to me who constantly kept saying, like, doing commentary. I hate when people do that. I'm fine if you're cheering. I'm fine if you're crying. I'm fine if you're showing emotions. But this kid was like, I know this isn't part of the review, but this kid constantly kept like saying stupid things, and I'm like, just pipe down, we're watching a movie. Even when I was a kid, I knew to zip my mouth in a movie theater, because that's the point of a movie theater. um but that little kid, but the action in this movie was great. I do think Harley has this amazing action scene, so for my criticism of Harley, I did like the action scene with her in it. Everyone had great action. Peacemaker and Bloodsport's connection was actually pretty good. To see two macho men, two macho assassins go head to head, I love that. Starro the Conqueror, I forgot to mention, but Starro the Conqueror is in this film. Starro was genuinely a surprise. I loved seeing Starro. I remember I was laughing so hard at Starro the Conqueror. I really loved him, but the action was great. The comedy in this movie is funny. There's many times where I was just laughing so hard, especially with Weasel. I think Weasel was hilarious. But yeah, I think everyone was great. Oh yeah, Sylvester Stallone's King Shark. I thought he was hilarious too. I really liked him as a character. And now it's cool to see King Shark in a live action movie. I know he was in the CW, but I don't really like the CW version of him. I do think I prefer the softer, kinder version of King Shark rather than the big, oh, I'm gonna eat people version of King Shark. But the comedy was genuinely hilarious. I really loved all the jokes. Or, yeah, I would say I loved all the jokes. And I think they work even better in the movie than they did in the trailers. I think it was hilarious. I think it was amazing. And I cannot wait to see what James Gunn does in future installments of the DCEU. I know he has to work. I know he has to work with Guardians 3. And as much as I love the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and I have a genuine love for those movies, I feel like his best potential is fulfilled with Suicide Squad. I remember when he announced that Guardians 3 was going to be his final film. It genuinely felt disappointing until I saw this movie. I was like, oh, you know what? Let's have that be the final. Let's have that be the finale. And Disney firing James Gunn was a blessing in disguise, because without him being fired from Disney, this movie would have never been made. We still would have had that horrible 2016 cut of the film just out there lingering in our nightmares. And James Gunn really brought the redemption for these characters. And, I think everyone was great. I think Starro the Conqueror was fun to watch. Peter Capaldi's Thinker, I actually liked him too. I think every member of the Suicide Squad. Um, but this film was great. It was just great from beginning to end. Where do I rank it in my DCEU? I would say it's my third favorite DCEU movie. You guys know Zack Snyder's Justice League is my favorite film of all time, so I still have that at number one. My second favorite comic book movie of all time is Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. When it comes to DC movies or DCEU, I would put the Suicide Squad number three, just above Wonder Woman and Man of Steel and Aquaman and Shazam. When it comes to DC movies, I would put it fourth place behind The Dark Knight. When it comes to comic book movies in general, it would probably be sixth place, just behind Zack Snyder's Justice League, Batman vs Superman, uh, It's the Dark Knight, Spider-Man 2, which is, there's the list for, and then you would have James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I think James Gunn's Suicide Squad is better than Joker. I believe it's better than a lot of comic book movies. Uh, that's my ranking. I'll probably talk about it more in the live stream, my ranking of the films. But yeah, that's gonna be it for my review. I love this movie. I recommend it to the people who love R-rated movies, who love comic book movies. This movie felt like a comic book come to life. It's probably the most comic booky movie I've ever seen in my life. James Gunn really brought his A game. I think James Gunn's on the road to being one of my favorite directors of all time because you have great movies like Slither, Super, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, the Suicide Squad, and then future installments like Peacemaker or maybe Suicide Squad 2 or anything really. I think James Gunn, phenomenal. I think this guy deserves more projects. Disney firing him was truly a blessing in disguise. Disney, I want to thank you for firing James Gunn. Sure, it didn't benefit you, but it benefited us, the fans, because now we have the Suicide Squad. Go check it out in the biggest screen possible. I do not recommend HBO Max. I think this movie is meant for the theatrical experience, but if you cannot watch it in theaters, then go on HBO Max. Go support this film because this film deserves the love it gets. And please, guys, understand this is practically not a sequel. This is more of a soft reboot. So for the people who don't want to watch it because of that first film being terrible, uh, it's alright, guys. Don't worry. This film is not that movie at all. Just slightly references it, and that's it. And anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching this review. Make sure you smash the like button, share this video with other fellow film fans, subscribe, and turn on the notification bells. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Isaac the Film Geek, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.